breathe, water we drink, and food we eat, we solely depend on our environment. Due to the irrational behavior of our kind during the past decades, the integral balance that existed in the natural world is gradually collapsing. As we are deeply linked with the environment, whenever it gets hurt, we are affected too. The ongoing pandemic COVID 19 sets a fine example to our interdependence with the nature. So, as we celebrate World Environment Day 2020 under the theme Time for Nature, global level action and awareness is requested. In parallel to World Environment Day, the Center for Environmental Initiatives, University of Colombo, present you a combined ideologies of experts on how and why we should care for nature. For this video, we are honored and grateful to have valuable inputs from Senior Professor Chandrika Vijayaratna, the Vice Chancellor of University of Colombo, Senior Professor Lakshman Disanayaka, former Vice Chancellor of University of Colombo, Professor Sarath Kotagama, Professor Emeritus from the Department of Zoology and Environment Sciences, University of Colombo, Professor Saroj Jayasinghe, Professor in the Department of Clinical Medicine, University of Colombo, Professor Lalit Sirigunaruan from the Department of Economics, University of Colombo, Senior Professor Ajit D. Alvis, Department of Chemical and Processing Engineering from the University of Moratuwa, and Professor Erandati Lukupitia, Professor in Department of Zoology and Environment Science and also the Director of CEI. We hope this dialogue will enlighten you and persuade you to take action to protect and conserve our blue-green planet. Before we go into our lineup, I would like to acknowledge Ms. Madhumi Karyavasam, the Environmental Officer of CEI, for coordinating this program, and FOSS Media for the technical support provided. So please do watch and share the video.
Hi everyone, welcome to World Environment Day, and on behalf of the University of Colombo, I would like to welcome all our staff and students and send my greetings for this very important day. Every sector of society should think of the environment. We are still recovering and still struggling to cope with all the changes in our lives that have been created by the epidemic of corona or COVID-19. And no doubt, the universities have to quite an extent buffered and maintained the educational milieu despite many challenges using the digital world. Thereby, there is less pollution of the environment is what I have observed, and I'm sure many of you have also experienced. We see much more greenery and much more animals running around, and in fact sad situations of even the leopards and other rare species coming out. So no doubt we have to pause and think in whatever field we are in as to how we should respect nature. Coming from a health sciences background, I cannot agree more. Most of our problems in terms of health and well-being are due to our not respecting the environment. Nature is something we cannot overlook or forget. And I'm very grateful to the director of Environmental Initiative Center from the Faculty of Science, Professor Arundhati Lokupitia, but she's also the director of the CEI. And she, together with her colleagues and students, have taken this field forward. Dr. Erandhati, thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful program put together with the digital supports to enlighten and also inspire our student population as well as our staff. We all know that COVID-19 occurred due to man interfering way too much with nature. And then with the globalization and very rapid travel, we experienced almost every country in this world to be afflicted and lose their loved ones, go through severe problems and challenges which they had to face, from their loved ones being lost to those fear psychosis generated by the infection, us being likely to be infected, and also particularly those without COVID-19 but who had diseases and morbidity being afflicted due to the entire structural and functional changes in the health sector, transport sector, and related fields. So let us hope that we can join hands with the multiple sectors and stakeholders and make Sri Lanka and the world a safer place respecting nature. All the very best. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
I'm going to talk to you about time for nature during the COVID epidemic. I think the COVID epidemic has highlighted the need for us to be sensitive to Mother Nature. As you all know, the epidemic commenced somewhere in China, and it's probably related to the way we destroyed the natural habitats, or we killed animals and came into contact with virus-carrying wild animals. The wild animal which we suspect is the bat, and all the studies seem to show that contact with the bat triggered off this massive epidemic. It's well known that loss of biodiversity promotes such infections. How do we create this situation? By massive deforestation, destroying natural habitats, killing wild animals, laying traps, and generally fighting against Mother Nature. This has to stop. In Sri Lanka also, we have to take a new perspective towards Mother Nature. Deforestation has to stop in Sri Lanka. Growing trees is not reforesting. Those are isolated trees. Having traps to kill wild animals and killing of almost extinct species is not the way forward. And as a country, we have to take a strong stand towards these. Stop being cruel to animals and working against actions which cause deforestation and destroying Mother Nature. So let's hope the time we had with the COVID epidemic helped us to rethink about Mother Nature. Thank you.
It is very timely to sit down and discuss about how to improve the natural environment around us, as we have seen how COVID-19 related lockdown has eased the undue pressure on the environment. In fact, COVID-19 made us to learn a lesson for safeguarding the environment in order to improve our survival chances from the diseases like this. This suggests that we all have to get together and see how we can conserve the environment around us for a safe and healthy world. Fortunately for Sri Lanka, the government has been trying to control the COVID-19 spread from the day one, and we all enjoy the benefits of that effort now. We should be thankful to the President for his leadership and everyone who contributed in various ways to control the disease within Sri Lanka. I'm also thankful to Professor Erandi Lokupitiya from the Center for Environmental Initiative of the University of Colombo for inviting me to make this brief speech on the link between COVID-19 pandemic, demography, and the environment. As a demographer, firstly, I would like to mention that there is a strong link between COVID-19 pandemic and population dynamics. COVID-19 impact is greater for countries where a significant proportion of population is at the elderly ages. This we have already witnessed because all these European countries and the US and some other developed countries have old age structures and they were more vulnerable to this disease. The available evidence suggests that elderly suffered the most in these countries. Please also remember, our population is also aging, but fortunately for our elderly, the correct and timely measures taken to contain the disease help to keep them healthy and safe. Population density also matters because high density areas were more affected, and we have already witnessed places within the Colombo city became clusters of COVID-19 disease. In addition, this situation was further aggravated by poor sanitary and unhygienic environment, which made easy for the disease to spread among those communities. Family types, especially co-residents and intergenerational contacts, are usually common in highly dense population clusters, especially with stronger social ties. At the same time, we see that co-residents and intergenerational ties are often seen as a social support and an asset, but they become a potential threat in the case of the current pandemic. Some demographers suggest that the rapid spread of COVID-19 in Italy can be attributed to higher intergenerational contacts, particularly regarding younger commuters from Milan traveling back to their villages. Therefore, improving sanitation, hygiene, as well as the redistribution of high-density population have become essential for the preparation to prevent any future pandemic of this nature. We never know when it will come again because throughout the history we have seen such pandemics coming and seems to be cyclical. Although we have been focusing on the non-communicable diseases, NCDs, lately, some of my research have shown the resurgence of communicable diseases time to time, like chikungunya, Japanese encephalitis, dengue, and so on. So we have to be alert and prepare for those in advance. In relation to the impact of COVID-19 spread on fertility rates, most demographers expect that fertility rates will drop, as even my research, which analyzed most tsunami and post-war situation fertility in Sri Lanka, that people are less likely to have children in periods of uncertainty. So the couples will postpone their fertility for a few years until countries come to normalcy. The role played by individuals' perceptions during uncertainty is already one of the key issues on the academic agenda of fertility experts in Europe, and we also should be investigating this hypothesis with 2021 census data, which is yet to come next year, and also with subsequent national surveys. However, I believe This will be better reflected not in 2021 census data, but in 2031 census data. Because of this pandemic, we experience the closing of borders, and hence international migration flows have basically come to an end. This consists of both circular and more permanent migration movement with major consequences for, among others, the labor market and migrant family relations. At this moment, we are still not very exact about how migration trends will be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the long run. The economic crisis that is already taking place and that is expected to continue after the lockdown may lead to a decrease in international migration flows for some years. Furthermore, we also might see a different migratory flow within countries. This is because outbreaks often occur first in large urban areas, and therefore there are new pressures as a result of the considerable urban to rural migration within some countries. We also witness that air pollution is likely to increase coronavirus death rate because countries like Spain, Germany, Italy, UK, and the US, and so on, were having tremendous air pollution in their major cities. Lung damage from dirty air and also smoking may worsen infections. Scientists who analyzed the SARS virus outbreak in China in 2003, for example, found that infected people who lived in air polluted areas were twice as likely to die as those in less polluted areas. Therefore, here in Sri Lanka also we need to think about our environment, especially where air pollution exists, which are the major cities in our country. We know that more populated areas with high level of carbon dioxide emissions, coupled with deforestation taking place in this country, will aggravate environmental issues, and in turn, we will become more susceptible to those communicable diseases. The size and growth of population in any country is also having strong impact on environmental degradation and increased human activity on the environment, as land encroachment and deforestation can take place with increased population. We have been witnessing these acts. Although Sri Lanka's population growth rate declines, the size of population will still increase, and my calculations suggest that our population will reach about 25 million by the middle of this century and start stabilizing for some decades in that number. And I have mentioned that this is the carrying capacity for Sri Lanka. The concept of carrying capacity is central to the discussions of population growth. Carrying capacity is an ecological concept that expresses the relationship between a population and the natural environment in which it depends for ongoing sustenance. Carrying capacity assumes limits on the number of individuals that can be supported at a given level of consumption without degrading the environment, and therefore reduces the future carrying capacity. Therefore, the concept of carrying capacity addresses long-term sustainability. With this brief note, I will stop. If you have not yet seriously concerned about the environment around you, this is the right time that you start doing it. We should love the nature around us. That will keep you happy and healthy and secure for a better world for the generations to come. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you very much.
In line with the World Environment Day, we are having this program. It's a very significant Environment Day. It is the 46th Environment Day since 1974. And many of you are probably in the Y and Z generation, so you would know only some things that have been happening in the last couple of years. But of all the 46 World Environment Days, I think this one is a very significant one for very important features. It's very experiential, not like the ones of the past, which you were talking of histories and situations that prevail somewhere. And secondly, it is a very relevant one because for two factors. One, we are living through one of the most unusual and horrendous environmental impact, which is the COVID-19. So we have the real experience of what nature can do when we do bad things with nature. Secondly, it is relevant because the theme this year is Time for Nature, biodiversity being the subset of it. So it's very important to try and recall where we are in terms of all of these things. As a Sri Lankan and in Sri Lanka, I think I have something more to add to this. And I think it's also very relevant that we have been reminded of some very important and salient features of life. We are told many years ago by our philosophers, and Lord Buddha himself did say that life is very uncertain, even though death is certain. I think this is a very interesting situation to recall that, because when we see what is happening as a result of the pandemic, our health system appears to be very good, despite the fact that the best systems that are said to be prevailing in the most developed countries are having problems which cannot be understood. Because if you do enter a hospital, to come out as a body bag is something that I would say is not a good idea of a good hospital. But that is the reality. So the second fact, of course, is again something that we have almost known in the Eastern sector, where we say that health is the ultimate profit or arogyo paramalabha. So which is what we are now seeing. To be healthy and to stay healthy is the most important thing if we are to continue as human beings here. Then we are also the victims of our own doing, therefore, because this pandemic is a follow-up of many emerging infectious diseases that we have had over the last 40-50 years. Since 1940, we have been told that we have experienced more than 330 plus such incursions from nature to humans as emerging infectious diseases. 70% plus of these are what are referred to as zoonotic or zoonoses or whatever terminology, meaning that it has come to us from the wild. And some of them have been very bad, but there's nothing to beat the one that we are going through now. Earlier SARS, and then we had Nipah and all of these things in different places, Ebola, all of these. Even if you start thinking of famous sicknesses that we call sleeping sickness and Lyme disease and all of these things, it's so much that we have had coming from nature. The fact is very clear that when we start incursing into nature, when we start invading into nature, and our numbers increase in the same time, we see very clearly that there is a tipping of the balance, and that balance is in the heavier side to the human numbers increasing and nature decreasing. We are around 30% in the whole planet today of what we would call natural forest. So therefore, we have done a lot of damage in the last so many years, since basically 1948-49, and that makes it even more significant that the life that we aspire to live for and what we are trying to acquire is based on certain artificial theories that are not in line with nature. So there are a lot of concerns. We are also reminded, since the World Environment Day falls on the 5th of June, and it happened to be the full moon day, and for the Buddhists, it is a very significant day, because for Sri Lanka especially, it is the day in which Buddhism was brought to this country by Arahat Mahinda, and when he preached to King Devanampiya Tissa at Mihintale, he was very clear to say that we are only the guardians of this planet or the nature that we live in, and we can't just take things for granted. So I think it's a very experiential, relevant theme for this year. But when you look at it, unfortunately, the word biodiversity has here not sunk into the heads of the people or to the rulers be and the majority. People do understand that we are living out of nature. There is no question about it, especially those in the rural areas. Maybe not so those who are in the urban areas, because for them they might feel that they are living out of the shop or the supermarket, because everything that they acquire to keep themselves alive comes from the shop or the supermarket. But for those who are in the rural areas, and very much so in the indigenous peoples of the different parts of the world, it is all that comes from what is around them in the forest or from other sources around it. So it's a very interesting situation. As I just said, in the global picture, it is only 30% that is natural forest. All the rest has been destroyed. And it's only last year that we saw the Amazon being burned, supposedly for business purposes. But that was the oxygen generating factory of the planet, which we were destroying. And there was a lot of concern about it. Follow with that, we had the climate change situation, probably telling us that we have even destroyed the climate, and therefore we are having the repercussions of it. Australia saw the largest or the greatest and the most unexpected fires for the centuries. And there is an assessment that maybe we have lost about 1 billion species in the process of that. Some of them have resulted in the extinction of a few, we are told. We are yet to see the final results of that. And then we have seen some very unusual situations of the cyclones, typhoons, tornadoes, all of these natural events that did occur for hundreds and millions of years, but now their impact is much greater than what it was. Of course, for two reasons. One reason, of course, is that we are everywhere, and therefore we are the victims of those natural events, and we are vulnerable for it. But what is interesting is that in the last couple of years, in the last 10, 50, 30 years, these events are becoming more and their intensities are increasing. It's only a matter of a month that India got hammered from two sides, first from the east and now then from the west. And both sides, India was sort of pinched at the top, and they're having an immense problem of the disaster in the midst of COVID. We were much fortunate because both of these so-called cyclones that came, Amphan and then Nisarga, both went past us, and we were only affected somewhat, not a great impact as was in the country of India. So you can see that in most ways, nature is taking the wrath of us and it's affecting us primarily because as scientists, we have to accept the facts of science that we have changed the environment such a way that it is causing all these problems. So biodiversity is basically our life, if we do understand what it means. Because biodiversity in its connotation of to be protected in this planet, since we started using the word in 1986 and then become a scientific word in 1998 and then endorsed it into a convention of biological diversity in 1992, not the word biodiversity, biological diversity, but the common use of the word biodiversity promoted by E.O. Wilson has now become like a household word. In Sinhala, we will call it Jaiva Vividatta, because we could not have had a Sinhala word for it because English did not have a word till 1986. So anyway, this is why we call it a pseudocognate, a word that was originated through the use and the need for getting a message across. But that message has a very significant and relevant components which we have to understand. One, we are talking about the minute quantities or the minute elements of nature, which is the genes. At the gene level, not the form level, which is I call the biological level, which is the picture that we see from outside. But in the word biodiversity, we are really talking about what makes that form and what makes that form change or whatever it is. So it's the genetic level, which we don't see. The virus that is causing all these things, we can't even see it, but it's a huge impact that is there. We know that. And then secondly, it is all about use and conservation. So it is all about how we are going to use these biological resources that is around us, which is what made us live all these years. For 2.5 million plus years, we have survived because we have been using the biological diversity, which we now want to call biodiversity. And then, of course, with that use came the new ideologies of theories emerging from the economics, is the give and take, bartering, and then the economic supply demand, all of these theories and putting values onto the biological diversity, which has enabled us to recognize what biological diversity is in terms of rupees and cents or dollars or sterling pounds and so on and so forth. It's immense. And third, of course, when we put that into that so-called market system or so-called bartering system, we are therefore having a disparity in some sense, in that some are using it, some are benefiting, and the benefit doesn't trickle down equally to everybody. And we have seen this, which was the net result of the Convention on Biological Diversity, which was initiated in 1981 and became a convention in 1992. And embedded in that convention is the story of access and benefit sharing, because the biological diversity or the biodiversity is a sovereign heritage. It was that which was people trying to make it a common resource. We don't say it anymore. We say it's a sovereign resource with common needs. And therefore we are willing and we have to make it available if necessary, if it has value to anybody and all humanity. But the benefits must be with the ownership of that sovereign resource. So these are very difficult things to understand. So that is why we have really not been able to optimize the situation, despite a lot of jargon, a lot of rules and regulations, a lot of good faith in trying to make things happen has come forth in the last couple of years, since 1992, with the Convention on Biological Diversity, Aichi Protocol, and so on. But we have not come to the point where we should be recognizing these three elements: the genetic level, the conservation and protection level, the use, and the fourth one, which is the access and benefit sharing. So until we come into that picture, biodiversity is going to be a very difficult one to understand. But to be simple, biodiversity is our life. If we lose biodiversity, there is no question that we will also be lost from this planet. If we do harm to the biodiversity, it will definitely hit back. And that is what we are experiencing from COVID-19. We may be able to find a vaccine and fight back, but that does not mean that the problem is solved, because the amount of biological diversity that is available in the planet is so immense that we are so bad to tell this, that we only know only 10% of what is there. So 90% we don't know. So how are we going to reflect and react to something that we don't know? We can only reflect and react to what we know and be wise enough not to harm the other 90%, so that we will face the same wrath of what we are facing with COVID-19 and other such emerging infectious diseases that we have had in the past. So make this World Environment Day a very important Environment Day to make a change in the life. Biodiversity is our life, and it is the lifeline of the nation. It is the lifeline of this planet. So nature, which is encompassing all of these together, is what we need to protect and conserve for the future. So very apt theme for this year, time for nature, because we have not had time for nature in the past. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that you will be able to make a difference in the future.
The weakness of this so-called neoliberal economic model is very well demonstrated during this corona pandemic. The giants in the economic world were we considered as unchallengeable powers of economic order were unable to sustain their economic activity and were unable to face successfully the corona pandemic, because they were based on this very weak and unsustainable foundation of greed and profit maximization, individual liberty, unlimited individual liberty. Whereas the countries where you don't have that kind of unlimited greed and unlimited individual flexibility, which can even harm the wider society, those economies have successfully managed this corona pandemic. And also those economies which were directly and strongly linked to the international trade flows suffered quite significantly compared to those economies which were more self-sustained, self-sufficient, and a larger extent of domestic economic activity met with the domestic economic resources and those economic activities catering to the needs of the country. Those economies which were very much import dependent, very much export dependent, suffered comparatively in a very big way compared to those countries which were largely relying on the indigenous natural domestic resources. And this gives us a lesson, at least for the basic needs of the people, because in a new economic paradigm, even in a new economic paradigm, you cannot avoid meeting the basic needs of the people. It is that unlimited greed that should be controlled. It is that chasing after the unlimited wants of this greedy human animal which has to be controlled. But the basic needs have to be met. The basic requirements have to be met. The wants, chasing after wants is something controllable or should be controlled, whereas the needs have to be met. And those basic needs, like food, like water, like medicine, like the basic energy, housing and clothing, these kind of things, the best is that we try to maximize the indigenous production to meet those requirements of the people, basic ones. And those basic ones, if the people can be happy and content, and if we can get into a paradigm where gross national happiness is put before gross domestic product, then I think the economy, the world, and the sustainability can have some hope. So I think this corona pandemic has taught a very good lesson to the entire world and opened a space for us to debate and think and evolve a new economic paradigm which is more sustainable than what we have seen during the past century or so. The Western economic development model we have been following during the 20th century and the first two decades of the 21st century cannot be considered as sustainable. There are a few fundamental reasons for that statement. Firstly, the Western economic model, particularly the neoclassical economic model, is founded on the premise that the decision makers, particularly the economic decision makers, the individuals and the firms and other stakeholders are self-centered, they are selfish, and their interest is their own greed, maximization and welfare. So when that kind of a model, when a model is built on that kind of a foundation, it is always kind of chasing after the objectives which are set much ahead and chasing after that without any concern or limitations other than something that you are artificially putting as laws or regulations. Wherever you have a loophole, wherever you have a room to bypass those, you go and try to maximize your welfare. And that welfare maximization, though we have a premise called limitation of resources, has no limit. And that greed has no limit in the Western economic model. Therefore, it is always exerting enormous pressure on the limited pool of nature, environment and ecology. And that enormous pressure of the economic forces that are exerted because of this greed, uncontrollable greed, and limitless expectations of welfare maximization of the people, humans, is always at the cost of nature, the animals, the wildlife, and the ecology. So by the construct itself, by the foundation itself, this economic model is bound to be unsustainable. Now, what we have done in the recent past is to try to patch it up by bringing in several kind of annexes to say that this has to be checked with the principles of sustainable development, and then you're building up economic development triangle, which is sustainable, where society, ecology, and economic growth are considered as poles. And then you're talking about legal and regulatory structures to protect nature and environment. Now, all those are artificial patching ups, where the fundamental driving force of economic growth and development in this neoclassical and neoliberal economic model is the greed and the ego and the self-centeredness of mankind. Unless we understand this inherent drive towards individual welfare maximization or profit maximization of firms and accumulation of wealth, I don't think this economic model has any kind of successful destination towards sustainable development. So it is high time that we look for a different economic model, and that economic model to understand that this greed cannot be a foundation stone of this new economic structure. And this greed, unlimited greed, has to be controlled. Whether that is done through inherent kind of self-control by way of human psychology and controlling those things by religion, like Buddhist economics that we are talking about, or by other consciousness that we are creating to the environmental consciousness by which you try to control this greed. I am not sure, but whichever the way that we can think of and we can contemplate, it is essential that this foundation stone has to be changed. This foundation stone has to be removed and a new one has to be put in, where this element of individual greed and driving for profit maximization has to be removed and changed by a new philosophy and paradigm. Then only we can probably think of a better economic model, development paradigm, which is sustainable.
Thank you, University of Colombo, for the invitation. As we are looking at another Global Environmental Day with the message, give time for nature. But in the middle of a pandemic, all of us, so it's time to think in different ways, to reflect. As I speak on this topic of industry-related impacts and potential innovations, it's important to think that perhaps it was an interaction with nature, an unfortunate interaction perhaps with a bat, or maybe the anteater, or a combination. The virus got into a human host, and today, in a very short period of time, all of us are in a very critical situation. But this has exposed a lot of economies in the way we have done our business, and certainly is asking us to think again how to conduct the business in future. It may not be possible for us to go back into the past and depend on one or two countries for everything. And that, unfortunately, is what Sri Lanka has become used to. We were dangerously sliding to a situation of bringing everything from outside and selling few things to the outside. And of course, depending on our labor from outside to sustain us internally. And perhaps the pandemic exposed our situation critically. And it's time that we understand these impacts and we change ourselves. Also, the pandemic is exposing us to think that this unstructured development probably led to this issue as well, because certain things that we have been doing, it's not just a matter of becoming closer to nature. It perhaps we have used nature, or we have come into contact with nature, or we are putting things on nature in very compromising situations. Perhaps bringing wild species into one location, where even in the wild they may not be close to each other. And then we ourselves come closer to that situation. So we create a potentially hotspot. And it may be such a hotspot that created this whole situation to arise. And this time, maybe after SARS and MERS and so on, and the bird flu, etc., this time the world really had to sit up and take notice. And for Sri Lanka, the same applies. There's no question that we need an industry. We just cannot run this life that's based on the service mentality. And expecting money coming from somewhere, we can expend and bring whatever we want from another place, and without doing much ourselves to ensure that our needs are met. And we understand the difference between needs and wants. Here we're talking about needs. Even needs we have a problem. Because we realize if the ship didn't dock, we may not have fertilizer. If we don't have fertilizer, we may not have our food supply. And of course, we have to think that as the number of population has changed, we may have to think differently, even with the agriculture. We have to innovate. Now, let me show very quickly 4 slides just to emphasize the point. So here I just want to emphasize with the bats flying after dusk and this contact that I was mentioning to you about, and the interest that we should have about the industry-related aspects, the impacts, as I mentioned, and in the importance of innovations. It's always the creative aspects of the human being that has propelled the human being to this situation. And I don't think we can ever deny that fact. It's sometimes that our creativity sometimes brings the worst in us. And that's what we should be careful. And that's why we talked about the economy that we have created. We need to definitely change to the concept of a circular economy. The economy that we have been just openly talking about, produce more, consume more, then waste and disposed, has to be stopped and transformed into a green economy. It's not just innovations that we have to think about. We have to think about eco-innovations. So there are a lot of things that we probably have to change as we move into the next stage, post-pandemic. So we have seen in Sri Lanka so many advances, so many inventions. Every day the newspaper, the TV, probably we all hear somebody's coming out, not just one person or 2 institutions, individuals coming out and demonstrating this is the solution. And of course, we know it's not the solution for every problem, because we have so many problems caused by this virus in so many ways. But nevertheless, we are seeing that people are taking on an issue and then try to resolve and a new idea and somehow or other ease the problem of an individual. It can be in many, many ways. Some of them are very simple. Some of them are quite complex. You go to another nation, you find the same thing. It's also something that I've observed with human nature. There are a lot of innovations that have come as a result of crisis. So because these times sometimes generate the best in an individual as well, they rise to the occasion. They come up with new things. And countries like United States have seen that after the Great Depression. So many things, including the jet engine, came around at a time period like that. And the Great Depression happened in 1990 or 1920. So you can name so many. And it's instructive, not just interesting, to go back and check on what they did at the time. So similarly, we have these things. And similarly, it's a very interesting thing when you put these 4 figures we have seen how we have been innovative over the time, and also been understanding that to save nature, an innovation is necessary. Then again, from that invention to save nature, another invention has been necessary. And again, to save the environment, from that third invention, another invention has been made necessary. Just think about it. And it's all in the service of one provision, that is light. Initially, the light, of course, in our economies, we had maybe the vegetable oil. But some of those rapidly advancing economies, they were using oil from whales. The whales were killed in so many numbers. If not for Edison, whales would have been gone by then. So thankfully for Edison, we spared the whales from that extinction at the time. But then we identified this is a very inefficient system. So we lose so much as heat and so on. So inefficient means an environmental burden, that is waste. So we came up with a CFL, which was very efficient. But then in that process, we introduced mercury into this, and we have a huge environmental problem. So we have to get rid of this innovation as well. Remember, invention, innovation. The bulbs are all over the place, people buying, so it's an innovation. It's not just an invention. So most of the pictures that I showed in the COVID time in Sri Lanka are still inventions or ideas that have been made into prototypes and deployed in one or two places. There is no economic benefit at this stage because there's no transactions taking place. But if the economy is to see, those ideas needs to come as innovations. Inventions should transform themselves to innovation. Then only the potential of inventions actually have an innovation, and then innovation has an economic benefit. So coming to the CFL, we have to come with another invention, the light emitting diode. And today we are in that phase of operations. We know how efficient that is. We also know how environmentally benign at the moment with the light emitting diode. Of course, there is resource consumption. So in all these things, there is a resource consumption. So that's why we have to look at a circular economy, not just a linear economy. I need lights, come what may, and I make the best use of what I have. So we need to change. So again, just final picture that I want to show. As we had the environmental days dawning on Sri Lanka, we also had plastic washing onto the beaches of Mount Lavinia. And this particular industry need to change. We need innovations, inventions in terms of biodegradable plastic. We know how to do that, yet we have been very reluctant to pursue this. And with COVID, we knew how much a role the plastic played. Nobody who was probably arguing about plastic to glass and so on may have really wished to see a glass tube. We knew the yeoman service the plastic is playing, but we also know the serious shortcoming of the plastic as it is today. So it's time for us to bring this invention, to bring this new knowledge and create an industry. And Sri Lanka has the ability to do that. And we should take a pledge basically to ensure that we develop a biopolymer industry. And that really will be a great service, because all what we are doing in plastics, we need such services. But we can't afford to have those services from a resource that is not going to be there in time to come, and also not from items that are going to be with us for 500 plus years once the service is over. So we know that we have been doing something very wrong and doing it in the wrong way, but we need this material. So it's time for that invention of redrawing that material differently. So hopefully COVID did teach a lesson in terms of the importance of something. But on June 5th on the beaches of Mount Lavinia, we saw the bad aspects of the same plastic. So let's take an idea that we need manufacturing industry in Sri Lanka. We just cannot be run on services. We also need to understand the emerging circular economy concept to be bringing, the green economy to be pushed with green materials. And as an example, a very good important example is we need bioplastics in our midst very fast. So let's marshal some of our sciences in this direction and get an industry that can be pioneering and helping us. Thank you. So thank you for the invitation. I hope I was able to give a very short message on the importance of the industry and the importance of restructuring that, but also taking new challenges by ourselves based on the learnings that we probably have had in these past few months, because it gave us time to reflect, and I hope that we didn't misuse the time or abuse the time and took the lesson in our strides, which is an important lesson to all of us. Thank you.
June 5th has been an important day for people all around the world because of the World Environment Day. Before 1974, there was no World Environment Day, and this single day became important only because people were neglecting their environment. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been any need for having a special day to celebrate our environment. As you all know, we have been damaging our environment through pollution and increased levels of greenhouse gas emissions, leading to climate change and global warming. And climate change or global warming has become the most serious environmental issue of the century. And not only that, its other impacts such as extreme weather events, including droughts and floods, and epidemics like dengue and pest outbreaks. The last year we were talking about the impact of Sena caterpillar on our crops, and this year, a few days ago, we were hearing about some damage from locusts in Mawatagama, Kurunegala. So climate change has been seriously impacting us, and there are other environmental issues. So all these have happened mostly because humans have deviated from the path of nature. So I think because of that, the environmental theme of this year, UN theme given for the World Environmental Day, Time for Nature, is quite appropriate under the given circumstances. Earlier, nature was there to protect us. As you all know, climate change is caused mostly by the carbon dioxide emissions due to burning of fossil fuels such as coal and petroleum products in industries, transport, and due to deforestation as well. So in the past, whatever we emitted were absorbed by the plants on land and the ocean. Right now, globally, the forests have become a net source of carbon dioxide rather than being an absorber or sink. That is because we have been destroying the forests at a very high rate. And right now in Sri Lanka, our per capita carbon dioxide emission or greenhouse gas emission is about 1 ton of carbon dioxide per year. And if we can reduce this, actually we are a very low emitter compared to the most other countries, but globally the emissions are very high, and we are also global citizens, so we also have to contribute towards greenhouse gas mitigation. We can do that by reducing our emissions and also increasing our sink strength by planting trees. So if you can plant a tree today, if properly managed, a mature tree can absorb more than 20 kilograms of carbon dioxide during 1 year. So if you can plant several trees, that would be a great help in mitigating climate change, at least to some extent. Every drop counts. So we should do whatever we could do to reduce our emissions and increase the carbon dioxide absorption from the atmosphere. And also when we consider the greenhouse gas emissions, even the waste sector contributes a lot. As you all know, we have been concerned about the waste management on campus, and waste, if it's not properly managed, and if it gets dumped on some landfill site, it can lead to methane emissions, which have a higher global warming potential compared to carbon dioxide. Compared to carbon dioxide, methane has a global warming potential of about 30 times compared to carbon dioxide. So that's why we need to reduce our emissions. That's why we have been promoting minimizing waste on campus. And also, you must have heard, must have learned during the past few months that plastic surfaces can hold coronavirus for several days. Now, during the lockdown period, we were happy because the environment became greener and there were less air pollution, and we all really felt that. But we also learned that we have to be concerned about what we use. If you use single-use plastic, such as lunch sheets and shopping bags, it could carry these viruses for several days. They are bad for the environment because they can remain in the environment for a long periods of time without degrading. So it's the time for us to think about nature, think about nature-friendly solutions, nature-friendly material during our day-to-day life. So with that, I would like to end that message. And so finally, as a take-home message, I would like to mention that we all as global citizens should be concerned about reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, increasing the sink strength of earth through planting more trees. So we need to be concerned about increasing the greenery around us, reducing our emissions. And when we did a carbon footprint analysis for the Faculty of Science during the last few years, my students who were taking climate change course in the science faculty, they calculated the carbon footprint of Faculty of Science starting from 2014. And we feel the impact of this waste management. Over time, our carbon footprint has decreased, and also the use of plastic has reduced over time. Compared to 2017, in 2018, we were able to reduce our plastic waste by 25%, and by 2019, we were able to reduce the percentage of our plastic waste by 46% compared to 2017. So I would end my talk. Please help us carrying out these activities by the Center for Environmental Initiatives. We greatly appreciate the support you all have given so far. Please continue with it and stay safe. Thank you very much.